This former rock and roll musician claims fire from God burned his mouth for 2 days. And now, wherever he speaks, this same tangible power. Steve, looking at you right now, it's hard to believe you were a long-haired rock musician. And also hard to believe you were depressed all the time. Kathy, you're the wife, was it?
Oh, yeah. Sid, he was the typical, he was on drugs all the time. He was very paranoid. It was beyond depressed. He was very melancholy, very paranoid. In fact, when I first met him and started dating him, he would carry a knife in his boot, and he had big old brass knuckles in his jeans pocket all the time. A very messed up, depressed and paranoid young man.
And how was your marriage?
Well, our marriage was, when we got married, we thought we would look to each other, and he said he'd turn over a new leaf and he'd get rid of all the drugs and the alcohol and this kind of stuff, and that he would change his ways. And unfortunately, his attitude didn't really change, and I was extremely self-righteous, I guess you'd say, and just thought I was better than him. So our marriage was not very healthy.
Were you headed towards divorce?
Oh, yeah, just after 5 months. We had a bad fight, and I said, I hate your guts. And one night it just happened. We had a big fight. I said, I hate your guts. I'm leaving you, buddy. This is it.
Steve, then you two bumped into your sister. What was wrong physically with your sister?
Well, she'd had a lot of surgeries and had her thyroid removed and her parathyroid removed and ended up in the hospital a lot. And I would get calls, and she'd be, in the hospital, and I'd go visit her, and the police would find her just slumped in the street, and they'd take her, and they'd run out of options. And
what was wrong with her?
Well, I don't think they ever. We don't really know what's wrong with her. We've done this, we've done that, and now you're just going to have to live with this. She had a big old thing of pills, took 36 pills a day. And that's the sister I had known, and her hair had fallen out and sickly, and her personality wasn't real good.
She was cranky all the time. Whenever I saw her, Sid, she'd have a heating pad on her stomach and just be sitting there and with a wig, because her hair had fallen out.
Watching television.
Yeah, watching.
That's about what she did.
So you got a husband that's depressed all the time.
Yeah.
You got a sister-in-law whose hair is falling out, sick to such a point she's collapsing, things being removed, and doctors, all they know how to do is remove things. Well, what happened to her?
Well, one day I came into the room, and the day we'd had this bad fight, and I was miserable, and there's nothing that'll make you more miserable than somebody that's not miserable and somebody that's happy and cheery. Mm-hmm. And I noticed it all day long. First of all, I noticed her hair was back, and she had never told me that she had, gotten well, or the doctors had found a cure. Her hair was back, but more than that, her personality was different. And there was this cheery person in the room with us, and I couldn't hardly stand it any longer. I finally, in the middle of the afternoon, I finally said, Nancy, that's her name, Nancy, what has happened to you? And from asking the right question at the right time, it's changed my life forever.
What happened to you?
Well, we asked that question, and she began to tell us a story of what had happened. And we were in my mother's home. She came in, and both of them began to tell us the story of how Jesus had come in real power, really changed them. It wasn't like church as usual. In fact, it's amazing that these things, we weren't even in church. And I think that had an effect on me, because all these years I'm thinking, things are happening and we're not even at church. But we're experiencing God and we're not even at church. And I found out that most people, way back then, I found out most people who go to church don't experience God either. And so we were outside of church, experiencing God in our homes and with each other.
But wait, okay. Your sister is healed.
Right.
She has an experience with God. She leads you in a prayer for an experience with God.
Yes.
And shortly thereafter, in the middle of the night, a fire comes on you?
Yeah.
Tell me about that.
Just maybe a week later, I'd left because I'd been down to visit. We went back, and I was asleep, and I just woke up. It was just suddenly, I just woke up, and the first thing I did, I put my hand in my mouth because I could feel this tingling all over my face and this burning. It was on fire. And I put my hand to my mouth, and my lip was just completely swollen, like somebody. My first thought is somebody's hit me.
Well, you know what he did?
What?
He woke me up. I was asleep. And he woke me up and he said, "Kathy, why did you hit me?"
We were just kidding.
No, I was trying to figure this out.
I mean,
you know, I'm looking at all options.
He had
And so-
a big old fat lip, just like
But-
I had hit him.
But there was something that didn't fit with getting
What?
hit, and that was, there was, what I look back now is there was I don't know how to describe it, the presence of God. It was like God in the room. And so I knew that that's different. And it just, I think God's with us now. But what is this? What is this? I didn't know what it was. What does it mean? What do I do with this? And so I immediately got up.
But wait a second. All right, you obviously saw something. What did you see? You
Definitely.
tell me.
His lip was all really swollen up and just bright red. But plus, Sid, he said there was like a presence.
Oh, you felt this too?
Oh, I felt a presence in the room. There was something beyond us, some force, some presence. I never experienced anything like it. Plus, it was dark out. It was like 2 or 3 in the morning, but there was like a little glow in the room. It was light enough that I could see his mouth without turning on the light.
I would have thought maybe I was having without all that going on, maybe I'm having an allergic reaction or something.
But what
my
was
natural
it?
mind.
What was it?
Well, I ran to the telephone and I called my mom, who lived about 100 miles away, and she was more experienced at this kind of stuff than I was at the time. And I described to her what happened, and I said, and she asked me some questions. She's going through these ideas, do you feel the presence of God? Is God in this? Do you feel joy? Do you feel peace? And I began to, yes. And she said, then something has happened. You have had an experience with God. And we got to find out what it was. And I still wasn't sure what had happened. And a week later, then we went to a meeting, met someone there. It was a meeting where they were praising and singing. And there was a person there. I thought, maybe they know. I went up, told them the whole story. And they said, don't you know what happened to Isaiah the prophet from the Bible? Bible days, and I wouldn't even put together something me with a Bible days prophet person. And they said, God took a coal, the angel of the Lord took a coal from the altar and put it on his lips. And from that point on, he was sent by God. And when I heard that, I thought, that's it. That's what's happened to me. God has touched my lips. That's all.
That is
God
amazing.
touched my lips.
But were you afraid at all?
No. There was too much.
It was peaceful and powerful
There was too
at
much.
the same time.
There was too much of him.
Yeah.
There was too much of him. There was too much of his presence to be afraid. But of course, you deduct from that, and I did I'll probably run out to the corner and start preaching these magnificent sermons right away because God has touched my mouth.
Coal went in your mouth from what you told me.
And so you think that right away that's going to happen. And I should know better. It didn't work that way at all.
Okay.
I needed training. I needed experience.
14 years ago, you were at a crossroads.
Yeah.
Tell me about it.
I was at a crossroads where I was offered a church in a large city, and I was offered this church in a town of 532 people that had no congregation, had been closed for 4 years. It was dingy. It needed to be painted. And naturally, I didn't want it. Who in their right mind would start a church in a town that looks like this and a town this size? So I'm out of there. And those people that owned the building, it was a historical site, going to be torn down, came to me 3 times and said, would you be our pastor? And I thought, I'm not going to get messed up with this bunch. So I told them no, and they asked me again. I said no. And the 3rd time they said, look, we will give you this church. We'll give you the building. There's pews, there's a little kitchen. We'll give you the land if you'll just take it and do anything you want.
But it's empty and the town's only 500 people.
And I was out of money. So, you got to think about your income.
Kathy, what'd you think about this little deal?
Well, I didn't like it at all. I was
We were embarrassed.
We thought we had a big city ministry anyway. We just had always thought that. And what are we doing in this little tiny cornfield town?
So how'd you end up in this cornfield town?
Actually, we ended up we lived there because our house had been hit by a tornado. And we had no place to live. So this whole thing kind of started in a whirlwind storm.
Yeah.
And so I moved to this quiet little town, not to be a pastor, but to travel and come back to this quiet, secluded little town. That's why I was there. I didn't even know this church existed on the other side of the town. And so they offered it to me, and I wasn't interested at all. But I ended up being the pastor there of a no-people church because I said, I'll pray about it. And you know what? I really
Did you pray about it?
I did out of guilt, not out of interest. I only felt guilty. If you say you're going to pray about something, my heart said you ought to pray about it.
So you did a religious thing?
Yeah. Just like 30 minutes later, I stopped my house, went in the living room. I thought, well, I ought to at least pray. So I knelt down and I said, God, here's this big church in this metropolitan area with 800 people. It had salary, it has benefits. It's got everything. Here's this other town. It has nothing. There's no people, no income. Mm-hmm. Jesus, what would you do? And just like a voice from heaven said, I'll tell you what I would do. I would raise the dead.
What did that mean?
To me at the time, it meant like, I thought my ministry's over. But
what do you mean?
Because I thought, here I'm going to be stuck forever. I'm giving up my whole career. But this word, I would raise the dead, I thought, God's going to do something sometime, someplace. He's going to make this thing alive again. And of course, being empty. But, it was a little hard at first because I thought I didn't really want to be in that town. But we went. We took a little PA system in with us and stuck a sign out in the yard, said Church Thursday, and we eventually painted it up, and it became what would be considered in a town of 532 people a good church. Maybe we had 180 people coming there. And so it was deemed successful.
So, 12 years later, no one's raised from the dead. It's a nice little church, but there isn't that presence of God. I mean, with such supernatural things that happened to Steve and Kathy Gray, he got so depressed. Come on back after this word, and you're going to find out how the dead were raised.
When the world becomes a dagger, cup of wine that makes you stagger, well, it's just another trial of your faith.
So, 12 years later, Steve and Kathy start a little church in a little community, 532 people in Smithton, Missouri. And 12 years later, after hearing from God that they would raise the dead, it was a good church, but some serious problems developed.
Right.
You had some problems with a few of your congregants.
Yeah, and I hadn't been depressed ever since the day that she talked about when we were in with my sister and my mother and was really touched by the Lord, and then this happened. And so I had never dealt with depression since then. And 12 years pass, and I'm starting to feel down again. We're in a town of 532 people. I'd preached about everything I could think of to preach. The church was good. It was starting to run. I don't know if people can understand this. It was starting to run without me. It's like you start your own business and you have that challenge, and then it makes it, now it doesn't hardly need you anymore. And then we had some problems, like you're saying, with some problems with people in the church, which is not uncommon today. But I thought that I could start a church where we wouldn't have those problems. And we had them. And we had some relationship problems. Some people that loved me decided they didn't love me anymore. I don't know why. That's what they did. And they decided to make my life miserable for me.
Bottom line, your worst moment, your worst day, what were your plans? What did you feel like?
I went out to the garage. I didn't know where else to go. And there I just stood, and I thought, what do I do? How do I get away? I didn't want to hurt the church. I didn't want to hurt the people I loved. I didn't want to hurt Kathy. I had already, she was hurting because of this. And I thought, how can I just disappear? And I started having weird thoughts like, I'll just get all my money out of the bank and I'll just leave. I'll leave Kathy, I'll leave the church, I'll just start I'll just start my life over. That's what I'll do. But how do I do that? I didn't know, so I felt locked in.
Kathy, you're the wife. You knew what was happening.
Yeah.
Describe what this man was going through.
Well, he was the type of guy he could always bounce back. He'd always could come back with a plan and always remain optimistic and hopeful and keep pressing in. This time, Sid, he lost it all. He had no hope left. He became totally broken, like crushed. I'd never seen him like that, just a crushed heart, like there was no heart left. and he began to just like weep all the time. I would find him, I'd go in the other room and find him just weeping and crying, and he just lost hope. Hope was gone, and a crushing had come. I mean, when betrayal happens to you, you don't even know how to handle it. And that's what had happened to him. He lost his bounce. He couldn't cope with life.
Did you realize that he might not only leave the ministry, but he was fighting for existing?
Oh, he was. I think, Sid, honestly, if he could have just left the face of the earth and stopped living, I think that would have...
Yeah.
Isn't that true?
Yeah.
I think
without hurting
if
anybody.
he could have found a way without hurting me and our daughter and some close friends and family, I think he probably would have just wanted to
disappear.
Okay, you suggested to him to kind of get away. There was a revival meeting in Pensacola, Florida, and you suggested that he go to the Brownsville Assembly of God Church, not so much to even go there, but just as a good excuse to get away. Yeah. You liked the idea. You went there. What happened next?
I drove because I thought, I'm just going to hit the road. You know, that old feeling of the long, winding road. So I hit the road and drove down there. And I wasn't interested in the revival at all because I was so hopeless. I didn't even want to be around church people, you know. But I was there, and I was going to just shut myself up in a hotel and try to find my life again and pray and pray and pray. And I thought, but I got my evenings free, I go. So as I was there, I began to see this movement of God and to see these happy people and to see, and what I believed was genuinely a move of God. I did not believe it had anything to do with me at the time. But I believed it was real, and I was glad for them. But there was no connection at that time between what I saw and what I needed.
You were still headed out, even though they were having a good time, but something happened.
Yeah, something changed.
What happened?
Well, first, I had an experience that seems kind of light to a lot of people, but I had the experience of hope. Hope came into my life. And you don't know what that means. When you've lost hope, and there's people, you know, listening that lose hope. When you lose hope and hope comes back, that's a major time in your life. And hope came in. I can't explain it. I don't know where it came from, but I've been praying for 3 days and getting nowhere. Suddenly, it just broke in, and it just went, just like if it started raining over me right now, and you just see it come over me like that. And hope just came over me. And when hope came over me, I went back into church that night, which I wasn't interested before. And I was watching, and all of a sudden I realized, I'm thinking like a pastor again. I'm thinking, oh, that was good. Hey, that's a good idea. And I caught myself. I thought, life is coming back into me. And so this went on, and I went up, and I sat in the balcony. And the voice that I told you about, where it said, I would raise the dead, 12 years had passed. I had not heard that voice. Right. And I was sitting there, and I heard the voice say, I want you to have a revival.
And you said yes.
No, I said no. Because
no!
I did. Well, you know, people in the Bible, it seemed like when they really got the opportunity, they always backed down, and that's what I was doing. I said no, because...
But this is what you were praying for 12 years. This is what this fire went on your lips for. I
couldn't do it. I just felt I couldn't do it. I thought, my strength is gone. My ministry's gone. I'm in no shape. I felt like I was beat up by everything that Christianity could beat up, a church could beat you up, people beat you up. I was so beat up, I thought, I cannot do it personally. It's not that I didn't want to do it, and not that I wanted to be rebellious. I looked at myself and said, God, I cannot do this. I don't have it in me anymore. So I was trying to get out of it. The next day I showed up in the service. I sat down. I heard a voice say, I want you to have a revival. Went through the same things. This is ridiculous. I looked down at the platform. There's all those great men and women of God, and they're so strong, and they look great. And I looked at myself. It's ridiculous. I can't do it. The next day I came in, I sat there, and I heard the same voice. I want you to have a revival. And I went through the same thing. I can't do it. I don't have it in me. And I heard that voice say, I didn't say you had to be a revival. I said, I want you to have a revival. Now, that's the last I heard from the voice of God. And that's been over 2 years now of our life.
So You called Kathy.
Yes.
You headed home in
Yes.
your car. Kathy, there was a service on a rainy Sunday night.
Yes.
Your husband... is on the way. He has the first time hope in his voice.
Yeah.
What were you expecting? What were you anticipating? What happened?
Well, first of all, he told me, Kathy, I'm going to be late for the service because it's raining and I'm out on the little back country roads. And I said, hurry up, I haven't seen you in 2 weeks. And he said, Kathy, when I walk in tonight, if something does not change, I can't go on. I will not go on anymore. So I knew that much. So I'm like on pins and needles. Then at 6:12, I kept watching my watch because he was late. At 6:12 p.m., Sid, I saw the door swing open, that same door that he had walked in every service for 12 years.
Excuse me. Steve, what were you expecting when you walked in that door?
I don't know.
You don't know?
No, I don't know. I had laid it out like this. God, it's up to you now. And I wasn't saying it had to be this way, it had to be that way. All I knew was I would not go back to what I was before. If I had to never be in the ministry, never preach another sermon, I was going to take this hope that I had, and I was going to live with hope in my heart. And if I never got to preach again, that's all right. If something happens, that's all right. So I just laid it out. It was like, that's the way it's going to be, and you're going to have to. I just could not put my life back together.
Okay, you walk into the
Yeah.
door where the meeting is going on, you turn the doorknob, you open the door, you walk in, what happened?
I could hear the music, and I'm hearing the music pumping through, and they're singing in there, and there was hope. So, there was hope, I guess, but expectation, I don't know. And I saw Kathy, and I thought, I haven't seen Kathy, so what do you do? I better go over and give Kathy a hug, because I'm a lot better now than I was when I left. So I walk over, and I take about 8 steps, and I reach out to her like this, thinking I'm just going to give my wife a hug.
Right.
And I never made it that far. I never did
What
give
happened?
I never did give you that hug.
Give me a hug.
Because I reached out to her, and before I could touch her, the lightning power of God struck me from heaven. Only this time it struck my whole body, and it meant,
As you're speaking about this, I feel the presence of God all over this set.
Yeah.
I feel what you're describing, but tell me what happened.
Well, it was different than years before when I had my lips touched, because when I was younger then, it didn't mean as much to me. And I think that's why time had to pass. By this time, I had gone through I had gone through the valley of the shadow of death. And now, to have life meant really something to me. And it lit me up. This was something that I felt like I had had my whole life saved. And it struck me with such force that I never did give her the hug, as we said, and I didn't know what to do. I just started jumping up and down. I know that sounds silly. If you haven't been there, why does a person, but I had never, I've been to church, but I never jumped or anything.
That was not like him?
Oh, no,
Never.
he had never done that.
All right, he started
No.
jumping up and down. What did you think, and what happened to you?
Well, 2 seconds after it hit him, I saw him change and become everything I'd wanted him to be. It was like all the weight, all the hurt, all the depression, all the fear, all the anxiety, all that destruction that had been just resting on him. In an instant, it left him, and I saw it in his face.
Yeah.
And his hand shot up, and he started this jumping, and it's like a split second later after it hit him, life or lightning or something tributaried off him, and it struck me, and it just struck our entire congregation. And it is like,
If you were in the room,
yeah,
you knew something
knew
had
it.
happened.
Everyone
Nobody
knew
had to
it.
tell you. So it's not like everybody just
No.
believe if you can. It happens so fast. All you had to be was in the room.
Okay. This power, what you've always prayed for, is happening in this tiny country church.
Yeah.
Very briefly, pick one person and tell me the change in their life because the power has touched them, but it's touching people from all over the world. Newspapers are writing articles, full-page articles about this. Tell me one person.
Yeah, well, we've talked about Leslie.
Just a
Leslie,
minute.
Leslie was a person preoccupied with death.
Yes.
I had done everything I could with her as a pastor, as a leader. We could not get into her life. And we any minute we thought she'll probably leave the church because we're just not making a connection. She's so radically touched by this power that we're talking about now, from this preoccupation with death. Now she has an occupation with life.
Yes.
She prays for thousands of people at the Smithton Outpouring now. Thousands come, and when she prays for them, that power goes from her, and they are changed.
Yes.
Many people come to her specifically
Radical.
for
You
prayer.
know what you
Yeah.
didn't do? You didn't do it. You didn't give her that hug.
Yeah.
Will you give it to her
Yeah.
now?
Here, after all these years. No.
And I pray for you. I pray that supernatural hope
Yes.
in the name of Jesus would come right through this television or this video and would literally tangibly touch you.